All right, we were booted off Zoom temporarily, and now we're back. So Kai, you were talking about how Peter Keating could have redeemed himself in his 40s and gone back to painting.
Yeah, although it's not letting me record.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's my fault. I'll do it.
So when I was cut off, I sort of was stepping outside the novel, which is something I like to do. I think it's legitimate, even though it's a little bit unfair to the writer, to the artist, Ayn Rand. I think in real life, it really would have been possible for Peter Keating to have a revelation or an epiphany in his life and then become a painter at age 40. He could have been pretty good, and Gail Wyman could have become an art gallery owner or dealer or something. So it's very tragic, but it doesn't completely break my heart, because I think in real life they could have done something differently, especially if they had great friends to sort of show them the way and show them the error of their ways. It would have taken, but of course, to speak for Ayn Rand, she wanted to make a powerful novel, and she did. So she had really heroic characters, which are stylized, and really tragic characters, which were stylized.
So not to negate
anything, it would contradict the novel to do that.
What did you say, Michael?
It'd contradict the novel to do that. That's not the
right.
point.
Yes, I agree.
And the point about that partly is being your best too, not just being partially as good as you could have been and really doing what you love. There's still all the suffering Keating had that would probably come out in his art from the time wasted.
Yeah. So not to negate anything that you said, Kai, I think in real life people can reinvent themselves, probably at any age, or
even
at least
after a concentration camp, they can do that.
Yeah. So but in defense of the way things turned out, couple things. One is that I think, again, in the art of fiction, she says that an artist needs to have standing orders in their subconscious to be on the lookout for material. And she wanted to be a writer from age 9. So she had been looking for themes and potential story material her entire life. And her conviction was that if you didn't have these kinds of standing orders, then you could not build up the kind of artist's mind that you would need to be in order to create truly good art. So there's one thing. And another is that Peter Keating did so many despicable things in his life that it would have inevitably contaminated his sense of life and his ability to create anything, really. Like, he had cut himself off from what he really wanted, and from his own emotions, his own desires. Like, he was so cut off from himself for so long that it would probably be extraordinarily hard at age 40 to suddenly turn off all this stupid and immoral and crazy stuff that he had done and then create beautiful art. Like I said, some of this stuff he did was absolutely reprehensible. Like, he kind of de facto murdered the partner of
the guy had a heart attack or whatever.
Yeah, the guy. Yeah, the old guy had a stroke because Peter Keating had dug up some dirt on him, and he was like threatening him. This really pathetic old man who was about to die anyway, but he really wanted to be partner.
Not calling the police or anything. I think he just left.
Oh, I think he called out to the maid. That seems to be what I remember. But yeah, like he's berating this poor old man, saying, I'm gonna tell everyone that you stole from the firm and you're gonna be ruined and everything else. So basically he knew what was gonna happen. That's why he did it. So, like, he murdered the guy, basically. So yeah, he was a bad guy. He did a lot of really irredeemable things in his life, and what kind of a soul is he going to be representing?
One obvious point, but which is still worth remembering, is that no one creates good guys like Ayn Rand, and no one creates bad guys like Ayn Rand. She set the standard. I don't think anyone can equal her in terms of heroism or villainy.
And Kyle, kind of like in terms of what you said, something like what you said actually happened in Atlas. But the characters were decent. They didn't have that fundamental betrayal of some of their own values, but still the characters in the Atlas gave up what they loved, at least to some extent, right? Did something else. cook
Well,
hamburgers.
yeah, but it wasn't. It wasn't that. It was mostly out of strength and misguidedness rather than purposely like rather than evasion. Like their problem wasn't evasion. Their problem was incorrect ideas or just being willing to take on more than they should have had to take on. Like in Dagny's case, she was trying to keep the whole world afloat, and in Hank's case, he was trying to be responsible for the emotions and stupidity of his family and um, whatever
Yeah,
else.
Jennifer, what you said about Peter Keating was both accurate and also applied in spades to Gail Wynand. You
Yeah.
talk about Peter Keating as much as murdered a man. Well, Gail Wynand drove a reporter to suicide in the same way.
Yeah.
Ruined a lot of people.
He didn't take a knife to his heart, but he was the reason the man killed himself. And he did that to countless people. He ruined lives left and right. He took glee in ruining lives left and right just to show himself, yes, this is the way the world is, and my attempt to seek power is valid because this is as good as people get. The way I look at it, because Kai's making a good point, except I think, Jennifer, you are too. By the time Peter Keating is 45, 50 years old, and I kind of relate to that, being in my 50s myself, there's a limit to how much you can regain what you've betrayed. Peter Keating is painting, and he shows his paintings to Howard Rourke, and Keating knows, and this is in the narrative, Keating knows right as he hands them over that there wasn't anything there. What does that mean? There isn't anything there? That he's not talented enough? That he can't learn to paint well? No, he's just got nothing left to say. There's nothing there because he has nothing inside. He has nothing to offer. And the same for Gail Wynand. People say, why can't Gail Wynand get over this? Howard Rourke put out the red carpet. He understood where he was and said, okay, let's get over this together. Gail Wynand can't do it. He cannot recover from what he did to himself, first and foremost. And the story could have been written differently, but I don't think it was just a matter of, oh, she had to do that because that's what the story is. I think she explains very well why neither one of those men could recover and why it's so crucially important not to betray yourself in that way. At least that's how I've understood it. And again, at my age, there are things that I should have done in my 20s and 30s and 40s that I didn't do. So I know at this point I will never be a rock star, for example. I haven't got the chops, and even if I worked on it day and night, there are some things which if I didn't get in my youth, I'm not going to get them now. I will never be a pro athlete. It's just not going to happen. And there may be people who are pro athletes at 57 years old, but that's because they were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. That idea that, well, it's never too late. Sometimes it is too late.
Peikoff said about piano. He'd like to play jazz, but too late now. He doesn't regret what he did in philosophy.
Yeah, and he was a good jazz player. He did that stuff at Ocon. It was pretty cool. But yeah, he'll never be able to perform at the level he would want to perform at. And Keating, he's not going to be satisfied with amateur paintings like he's doing now. He was the tops of architecture. And, he'll probably keep painting, and it'll be a sad thing, and it will be somewhat cathartic for him. But in terms of what they're talking about in the novel, it was too late. And it's sad and it's tragic. But as Kai says, nobody writes the bad guys like Ayn Rand does, or the sad stories. And as J.K. Rowling said, if nobody dies, then it must not have been much of a conflict.
Yeah.
They asked her, why'd you kill off my favorite character? Why does Peter Keating have to be so tragic? Well, if nobody dies, there must not have been a real story there.
Yeah, just as an aside, when the Harry Potter books were still coming out, I remember all the speculation of who's going to die this time. Is it going to be one of the main three? Who's going to die? Who's going to die? But yeah. It was always pretty minor characters.
Well, I love the way J.K. Rowling talked about it. It was always about the story. And she, it broke her heart just like it broke everybody else's heart. But she did what she had to do in service of the story she was trying to tell.
Oh.
Kai, I see you talking, but there's no audio. Just so you know, we can't hear you. It's not muted, is it?
No, it's not muted. Yeah, we can't hear
There's
you,
just
Kai.
no audio.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you've got the little microphone that shows you levels and you can see if there's any levels on your end.
Oh, can you hear me now? I think
Yes,
I
we
may
can.
have pressed a button.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, now we can
Right.
hear you.
So, okay, I'm so sorry. I pressed a button. So, oh, well, I don't have very much to say. But I would simply speculate what would have happened if Ayn Rand had died right after she wrote The Fountainhead. In my opinion, she would have been hailed as a brilliant and stunning writer, and a small number of people would have liked her. But once she went on to write Atlas Shrugged, she sort of left the world behind. She became a radical. People could not deal with her. They hated her. There were still a small number of people that related to her as a human being after she wrote The Fountainhead. They said she was fantastic. Her novel was sort of a niche novel, I think, for a small number of high-quality intellectuals that could deal with it, even though despite a lot of the masses liked it too. But once Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged, she just took herself to a much higher level, and people turned on her. They hated her. They saw how absolutely brilliant she was as an intellectual and as a fiction writer. So her life changed completely. I think she was a normal, accepted person after The Fountainhead. And after Atlas Shrugged, she was a pariah in the world.
I think
More
Atlas
importantly,
Shrugged is
after
easier.
Geez, my life would suck. I just want to go cry right now, curl up in a freaking ball. Say, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. Why'd you have to say that?
Oh, I'm sorry, but
That hurt.
I just remember that some of the reviews actually seemed to understand her very well, and they still weren't quite as smart as her, or they still weren't quite as virtuous as her, but she still was sort of in the world. And she became in my opinion, a world revolutionary, a philosophical revolutionary after Atlas Shrugged, and people just turned on her. They saw her as a deep, dark enemy who wanted to destroy the world, which she did, but she wants to destroy, the bad, illiberal world and replace it with what I call a rational, liberal world, a much better one.
I think Atlas Shrugged is an easier novel to grasp. It was definitely easier for me to read at age 20 than it was for me to read The Fountainhead at age 20. And I think in that way, Atlas Shrugged is more accessible. I think the characters are easier to understand. The themes are easier to understand. And it's also at the level of politics rather than deep. Well, I mean, there's definitely deep philosophy in Atlas Shrugged, but I think because it's concretely like in the world of politics and how people interact with each other, it's easier to see. It's kind of more concretized. So as I don't know if The Fountainhead would have ended up being buried in history if it weren't for Atlas Shrugged bringing attention to all of her other writings. I don't know. I mean, that's a really interesting thing to speculate about.
No, I think that The Fountainhead absolutely would have been alive. And even if she was forgotten, she would be rediscovered almost certainly. It's not guaranteed, but if it had been forgotten, people would have spotted the brilliance. And you say interesting things, Jennifer, but just to be clear, you were saying mostly the opposite of what I was saying. So I think there's a certain normalcy to the novel of The Fountainhead, for all of its intense stylized writing and heroism and great characters, which are different from any others, in my opinion, and philosophy, which is different from any others. You could still sort of relate it to the world. And she once called her philosophy in that period individualism. She said America was based on individualism with a capital I. But after Atlas Shrugged, she was a different person. And she had a new philosophy with a new name called Objectivism with a capital O. And she was no longer a normal type, brilliant, stunningly great writer. She was a world revolutionary after Atlas Shrugged.
They did the Fountainhead movie. Was that before Atlas or after?
It was before.
Before.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating insight, Jennifer. The idea that if you are trying to understand the world, that Atlas Shrugged would be more accessible to you. That's because I think, as Kai suggests, for most of us it's the opposite.
Yeah.
But that's because the Fountainhead is more personal, and a lot of us were trying to figure ourselves out. But you're right. If you're a young a person just getting involved in politics and trying to figure out what the hell are people doing out there. Atlas Shrugged would certainly be your primer on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Maybe we could do a change of pace here. So does anyone have any favorite scenes? I bet one favorite scene for everybody is the scene with the boy on the bicycle riding through the woods, and he comes across Monadnock Valley.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's favorites, to be sure.
Yeah. So
that one certainly gets me.
yeah. So just to recap, that's I think it's section 4 called Howard Roark. It's at the very beginning of it, and Howard Roark has gone through all these ups and downs in his career, and he just finished this vacation home project in upstate up in New England somewhere, and he's designed this whole village and created this incredible area where he's built everything in his style, where he's incorporating all of the natural elements into it, and it's just this incredible work of art. The whole retreat is a work of art, and he's employed all of his old friends who are in line with his philosophy, and they basically created this monkhood of art where they created this incredible place. And so this boy is he's 22 years old or something. He just graduated college, and he's wondering if life is worth living. But that's not quite the thought process in his mind, but he's just wondering, like, what is life about? Why bother doing anything? And why is it that I can't find meaning in the works of man? Why do I have to come out to nature in order to feel any peace? So he's riding the bicycle, and he's, kind of wondering if life is really worth it. And he comes across this incredible work of art down in this valley. He sees the whole thing, and he's completely dumbstruck. And he sees Howard Roark sitting off to the side, and Howard Roark is looking at it. And the boy asks, "That's not real, is it?" And Roark goes, "Why, yes, it is." And the boy says,
"Yes, it is
who
now."
Built it? It is now. It is now. See, you've got this. You've got this down.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is another one of those sequences. I've heard people read this, and they read it coldly. And how could you read this? Imagine for a moment, you're an architect, and you've just designed this, not just a house but this complex of houses, these artistic achievement. Now you can even imagine somebody doing that coldly, but you're the architect, and you're now sitting on a rock overlooking what was just finished. It was created, and nobody's moved in yet. It's all pristine and beautiful. And people read this like, that isn't real, is it? The boy asked, pointing down. Why, yes, it is now. No, that's not how Howard Roark sounds like. It's like, why, yeah. Now, if he was supposed to be emotionless, would she have written, why, comma, yes, comma, it is, no, this is that kind of casual thing that everybody says Ayn Rand doesn't do. Why, yes, it is now, the man answered.
That's a very powerful scene. But I think the novel is filled with one powerful scene after another. So Jennifer asked, what's my favorite scene?
Oh, well,
my scene is
hold on. Robert's not done talking about the passage yet. We'll get to you in just a second.
Sorry.
Well, I think I kind of made the point. It's just, when I read it, I don't know how you could read this without getting pumped up, It's not a movie set or a trick of some kind. No, it's a summer resort. It's just been completed. It will be open in a few weeks. Who built it? I did. People read this and they're, I did. No, he's not talking like that. Oh my God, why would he even be answering the kid if that was his point of view?
I imagine what it's like for Howard Roark. He's looking at this thing, he's admiring and reflecting on the incredible time he's had designing and building this whole thing. And this complete stranger comes up and the kid's like, that's not real, is it? And he goes, yeah, that's real. It is now.
Yeah. What's your name? Howard Roark. He says, the kid says, what's your name? And he answers Howard Roark. It's like Roark writing his signature. it's
It's his
Howard
name on the
No.
architect.
Yeah, those are like
Yeah.
and why
those
do
are tremendously powerful lines, like Howard Rourke and I did. You can't get more powerful lines than that.
and here's the thing, and if it sounds like I'm a little fired up about this, and again, because this is being recorded, I'm going to say this to everybody listening to this recording. If you study Ayn Rand's philosophy, and what you get from this philosophy is, I built it. You didn't get the philosophy. You didn't understand objectivism. And it frustrates me sometimes that I don't see passion once people take in these amazing ideas and start applying to them to their lives and change their relationships and change their careers and start really living their values. So that's why I get a little fired up.
All right. So since
Well,
you've got
it's a
it
lot of
opened up-
passion. It's a lot of passion, but it's also a lot of logic. So I think Ayn Rand, when she creates this great dialogue, she's sort of demonstrating or proving to everyone how you should be in terms of high intelligence, and how you should be in terms of high virtue, and how you should be in terms of having a heroic spirit. And she does have a lot of passion. It's obvious.
So
Robert-
Kai, you were going to tell us your favorite scene?
one more
I
thing.
can say it very quick.
Oh, one more thing.
Sorry.
One more thing. Robert, since you've got it open, can you read those last few lines of that passage?
Oh yeah. Well, the last line of dialogue
Not
Thank
the
you.
dialogue necessarily, but like the very last.
said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, said the boy. He knew that the steady eyes looking at him understood everything those two words had to cover. Howard Rourke inclined his head in acknowledgement. And that right there, he just gracefully, yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying to me. And I'm able to receive that because I designed this. Sorry.
Be cold. That's not a cool person.
Wheeling his bicycle by his side, the boy took the narrow path down the slope of the hill to the valley and the houses below. He goes into Rourke's project to ride around in it. Anyway, Rourke looked after him. He had never seen the boy before, and he would never see him again. He did not know that he had given someone the courage to face a lifetime.
There it is.
There it is.
What's great about that scene is because she really has to write the whole novel first in order to make those scenes very powerful. But that's what she did, and so you know that it's not an accident. She really made those scenes very, very powerful.
Well, how many people did Ayn Rand give the courage to face a lifetime?
Well, she did, but she gave them also, unfortunately, the courage to be a kind of a cultist, because she showed such
She
stunning
didn't do that.
power.
That's their own fault.
Well-
Parts in the culture, that's not her. It doesn't come from her.
Well,
Good
I think it's
attribution. That's not the cause.
found in her philosophy in between the lines, because she makes people feel really, really alive, and so she persuades people in many, many different ways, including some ways that are not legitimate, in my opinion.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. They're not between the lines.
I disagree with that.
But you can say you disagree, but there's this vast history. Objectivism was identified as being a cultist
And if it's between the
movement in
lines, then you're
1960s.
saying that I don't really understand objectivism. You're saying that people that understand it better, and I don't understand it as well. And is that really right? I don't think, 'cause that's an implication of what you're saying.
Well, she's a very
Can I not
powerful
read between
writer.
the lines?
I would say that she's a stunningly powerful writer. She's maybe like 5 times as powerful as Nietzsche. And so because she writes so very well, and she writes such good philosophy, and she's got such an indomitable spirit and so much virtue, you're inclined to follow along with everything that she says. And in
Can't
some
imagine
sense,
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
Can't imagine that.
Well-
How can you have a philosophy that says think for yourself and then say, but the person who wrote it was such a powerful writer that people don't think for themselves?
She even said
You
that
can-
in regard to
you can-
Brandon, I think. She said, what is it? Maybe y'all remember, objectivism isn't for anybody. I forgot the exact quote. She said that explicitly.
Yeah.
We'll give
Yeah.
it 2 more minutes to argue about this, and then we'll go back to favorite scenes.
Well,
it's a big argument. It's a
Right.
giant argument. But
that's why I didn't argue. I'm just saying I disagree.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing real quick? Hi,
Hi,
I'm
Amy.
Hey there.
Hi, Amy.
So I can understand that. There's a big part of that I really disagree with, but I can understand that if somebody is already predisposed to looking for like a dogma to follow, because I have known people who are Christians and they turn to Ayn Rand and they look at her books and they're looking for the formula to follow without actual independent thought. Now that doesn't actually work out for them. That later on in their life they'll say, "Oh yeah, I went through my Ayn Rand phase."
Right.
But that's But yeah, I'd say that for people who are active thinkers and not looking for a dogma, you're gonna find that looking at her writings, every line of her writings is an advocacy for free will and for against determinism and against obeying and for an advocacy for reason. So yeah, if a person's honest, if a person is an active-minded person, then yeah, they won't fall into cult-like behavior with it.
Well, cultism is a giant topic, and I don't hear almost anyone saying the things I have to say on it, but I can't really summarize it quickly because there's at least like 3 or 4 major points which I don't hear any objectivist discussing ever. So it's a big topic.
Well, you
If you
can
want to be
always
scientific and find a cause, what is the cause of someone doing that? It is not in Ayn Rand.
Right.
Causes are things in our culture, things from religion, things from broader dogma and being irrational beyond religion and human history.
All right,
The
time out.
misinterpretation of Rand, it is not.
Okay, time out. All right.
2 minutes up. Okay. Any other
Back to
last
the-
words?
all right,
2
back-
minutes up.
Back to
Jennifer puts her foot down.
All right, so back to the topic of favorite
Jennifer, you're a
scenes.
tough taskmaster.
I have to learn to be more assertive in this way. Like I think the first big talk that we did, there were like 12 people, and like there were just like 3 people who completely dominated the conversation, and I was just not forceful enough in keeping everybody in line. So I'm having to learn how to moderate with an iron fist more often. All right, so favorite scenes. Anybody else?
Well,
I'll say one more. I'll tell you one brief scene, and as usual, I will perhaps be as ambitious as I can be, which is what I always am, and that is every scene is great where the good guys are arguing with each other or debating with each other, and when Rourke is talking to Mallory, but maybe a really powerful scene is when Rourke has this very tiny conversation with his enemy Ellsworth Toohey. So that's a very powerful scene, and yet I would still step outside the novel, even if this is a little bit unfair, and say I wish there had been more conflict, like maybe 3 long conversations between these two. And I also think that ultimately, however great that scene is, in which Rourke says, "But I don't think of you," that's not quite realistic. I go through life and I'm very proud to say I think about all the good guys in the world and all the bad guys in the world, and I do think about the forces of evil, and Ayn Rand did too. So it's a great scene, but it's possible to criticize it too, even if it involves you stepping outside of the novel a little bit and perhaps being unfair and violating the principle of artistic license, which is Ayn Rand's right and every novelist's right. But I do think about the bad guys.
Anybody else?
I don't think I'm wasting my time by studying them, and I don't think Ayn Rand wasted her time by studying the bad guys. That's why she learned so much about evil and so much about good, and she taught us so much. And she wrote great fiction and she wrote great philosophy because she did think about good and evil in people.
All right, Michael, what's your favorite scene or a favorite scene? 5 scenes.
Partly I'm kind of brain dead, but I don't know. I have to think favorite. I'm not sure, but of course, like a lot of people, the beginning when he's swimming, diving into the lake.
Yeah.
I have to think about it. There's so much. I mean, it's Rand. What did he say?
Oh, speaking of that very first scene, I went back and just opened it up at the beginning and started reading a bit, and I spotted a metaphor that had escaped me the past 22 years. There was something about something like he saw the iron, like streaks of rusty iron, and he was thinking about building girders that would girders against the sky. In other words, something like he would build something to hold up the heavens, like all of the ideals in the world he would be holding up with the girders that he himself builds. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, since Kai mentioned,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, since Kai mentioned the scene with Ellsworth too, I was going to say, not a favorite scene, but a favorite theme, which people associate with that Tui sequence. It happens again earlier, it happens throughout the book. This is part of what people consider to be Rourke's coldness or indifference. He's walking down the street. People turned to look at Howard Rourke as he passed. Some remained staring after him with sudden resentment. They could give no reason for it. It was an instinct. His presence awakened in most people. Howard Rourke saw no one. For him, the streets were empty. He could have walked there naked without concern. And then go forward to the scene with Ellsworth too. But I don't think of you. And people again read that as, but I don't think of you. No, he doesn't care about Ellsworth Tui.
Yeah, the movie was bad. Maybe in that respect, Rand hated it too. I read that. She hated that line, the way it was done.
Yeah, Tui was of no concern to Rourke.
He knew he did it bad after the movie came out. She said, "This is how you got to do it." He didn't listen, did it that way.
No.
It was like, "Oh, you're right."
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, tell me anywhere else. What do you think of me? But I don't think of you.
Right.
And the comparison I draw is to Cyrano de Bergerac. Everybody knows Cyrano?
Yeah.
But you failed to disquiet me.
Yes. So Cyrano could not suffer a slight against his good name. It wasn't just people who insulted his appearance. It was people who insulted him in any way. And that's an interesting distinction to me, the Cyrano attitude of, I will not tolerate any attack on my values, versus the Rourke perspective, which is, it's not an attack on my values because I don't care about you. Why should I care about you?
It's not just that, but Rourke, his values are all consuming for him. Imagine being such a strong person to be so selfish all the time, to be so focused on living your life, loving the doing, that some insect comes up to you and say, ha ha ha, don't you think of me all the time, I'm evil. And you're like, you're just a bug.
Well,
and then you go on your way. And
eventually Rourke realizes, well, I kind of have to do something about those people.
Yeah.
That shows like some people might think he's rude to the dean or selfish and wrong, but he's being generous. He's respectful.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
I appreciate that. These other people I know in this other book are going to give their friends decades to figure out the truth before I take them to this other society. So yeah, maybe you'll learn, but I appreciate your thinking, and that's cool.
So what I love about that comparison is that I admire Cyrano de Bergerac's heroism, and in some ways I want to be more like Cyrano. But who I really model is Howard Rourke. And that's why I don't really see Howard Rourke as an archetype and an untouchable hero, because I have that attitude of I don't really care about people who attack me.
He really does.
I don't.
And sometimes it frustrates me.
Sometimes it frustrates Amy because I will forget to defend her in that way. I just assume she doesn't care about that stuff either. And I'm working on that because I think there's a place for the Cyrano perspective and there's a place for the Rourke perspective. Yeah. But when people tell me Rourke is unrealistic, then I'm unrealistic.
I think
Because I always tell people, bring it on, and not bring it on because I'm going to fight back, but just I don't care.
Yeah.
Why would I care that somebody insults me?
Yeah, and I think Cyrano is a far more tragic character than Howard Roark because his sensitivity, it's a hypersensitivity to what everyone else thinks of him, and then when it's time for him to you know he wants to show the woman that he loves her, but he can't because he's so sensitive to what everyone thinks and what he thinks other people think are his flaws that he can't do it. He has to get a proxy, and he never gets the girl. I mean, that's super tragic. Like, despite the fact that he's able to live a grand heroic life, he still has a really deep insecurity, and he never really gets over it, and that's tragic.
Yeah.
Maybe, just for the record, maybe generous isn't the right word. Maybe magnanimous or something like that. Just for the record.
Yeah. I've never really read Cyrano that way.
I mean, for Rourke, talking to the dean, I use the word generous, but maybe magnanimous or something like that would be better. But
I just think of him as being very civilized,
Yeah.
and reasonable, which is probably more than the dean deserved at that point. So you're right, that is magnanimous. But yeah, Cyrano to me is a tragic figure, but I don't really think of it as him being oversensitive, as having a tragic metaphysical flaw. I don't know that his character had a flaw. I mean, we all say you should have got over it. You should have realized somebody who loves you that much could deal with this grotesquerie. She wouldn't see it that way. She says she doesn't see it that way.
Well, right. I mean, he's not entirely tragic,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, he's definitely a flamboyant guy, and he's great. I mean, Cyrano's great, but he still has a tragedy in his life because of
Yeah, it's hard to you're right. You think of Count Guiche at the end of the story, who says, after you've lived the life that I have, and there are 1,000 pains of this, courtlier life that I've lived, but should I meet Cyrano at this point, I would be proud to shake his hand.
Yeah.
Or De Guiche has
I think
everything.
artists are allowed to present their story based on artistic license and make it very stylized. It doesn't have to be real to life, and you sort of get what they're trying to say. So both of those stories, Cyrano de Bergerac and the Fountainhead, are great and stylized, and I grant the writer the right to tell their story in their own way and get their point across in the way they want to.
We're about to run out of time again. Would you guys like to do a third version, or would you like to wrap it up?
I haven't said my favorite scene yet, but
Oh, excellent. We'll do a third one, and we can let that run as long as we can. And I will stop recording here, and I'll set up a third link, and I'll send it out.
I'm going to bed.
Yeah, I actually have to have some more work to do tonight, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I would love to hear your. I would love to hear your.
I think it is when they're talking about how to well that's good too.
Okay, great. Amy, I want to hear your favorite scene, so maybe we'll just do that on a side chat.